In the history of the United States, no administration oversaw more illegal border crossings than what happened between 2021 and 2024. The numbers aren't a political talking point. They're documented by the federal government's own data. And tonight, we're going to lay it all out, fact by fact, name by name. Let's start with Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the agency that tracks every single encounter at our southern border. In fiscal year 2019, under President Donald Trump, CBP recorded approximately 851,000 border encounters. The Remain in Mexico policy was in place. Construction on the border wall was underway. Numbers were dropping. Then came January 2021. Within his first hours in office, President Joe Biden signed a series of executive orders. He halted border wall construction. He ended the Remain in Mexico policy, officially called the Migrant Protection Protocols. He reversed the Safe Third Country agreements. Each order, signed with the stroke of a pen, dismantled years of bilateral negotiations and infrastructure. The reaction was immediate. By the end of fiscal year 2021, CBP encounters had skyrocketed to 1.7 million, a 300% increase over the prior year. In fiscal year 2022, the number hit 2.3 million. Fiscal year 2023 saw 2.5 million encounters, and by the time the Biden administration ended, the cumulative total had crossed 10 million documented encounters at the southern border. 10 million, that's more than the population of Michigan. It's important to understand exactly who made these decisions and what they said. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas testified before Congress 13 times between 2021 and 2024. He repeatedly told members of Congress, under oath, that the border was secure. In February 2021, Mayorkas issued an internal memo gutting immigration enforcement priorities, instructing ICE agents not to arrest illegal immigrants unless they were convicted of aggravated felonies or were national security threats. Effectively, millions of people entered the country, and federal agents were instructed to look the other way. In March 2021, Biden appointed Vice President Kamala Harris as the so-called border czar, tasked with addressing the root causes of migration. Harris would not visit the actual southern border for over 3 months, finally making a brief trip to El Paso in June 2021, a city more than 800 miles from the Del Rio sector, where the worst of the crisis was unfolding. Meanwhile, the administration pushed what they called a new processing model, catch and release, but with a new name. Illegal border crossers were documented and released into American communities with notices to appear in immigration court, often years in the future. The immigration court backlog exploded. By 2024, more than 3 million cases were pending, a number so large the system could not process them within decades at current staffing levels. The media often reduced this story to desperate families seeking a better life, and while economic migrants made up a significant portion of those crossing, the CBP data tells a more complex story. In fiscal year 2022 alone, Border Patrol apprehended more than 98 individuals on the terrorist watch list attempting to cross the southern border, compared to just 3 in fiscal year 2020. That's a 3,166% increase. In that same period, CBP seized more than 14,000 pounds of fentanyl at the southern border, enough to kill every single American more than twice over. The Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, 2 of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations, had effectively taken control of migrant smuggling operations, charging between $5,000 and $15,000 per person to cross. For the cartels, the mass migration crisis wasn't a humanitarian issue, it was a business model. And while Border Patrol agents were processing and releasing hundreds of thousands of migrants, the cartels used the chaos as cover, moving fentanyl, methamphetamine, and other drugs across unguarded sections of the border. DEA data shows fentanyl-related overdose deaths in the United States climbed from approximately 58,000 in 2020 to over 74,000 in 2023. A drug so powerful, 2 milligrams, the weight of a few grains of salt, is a lethal dose. The American people were not just witnesses to this crisis, they were paying for it. The Federation for American Immigration Reform estimated that illegal immigration costs American taxpayers approximately $150 billion per year when accounting for education, healthcare, law enforcement, and public assistance programs. In Newark City alone, Mayor Eric Adams declared a state of emergency as over 100,000 migrants arrived in the city. The city spent more than $4.3 billion on migrant services by the end of 2023. In Chicago, Illinois, the city council voted to spend $70 million of its 2023 budget on migrant housing and services, even as neighborhoods on the south and west sides faced chronic underfunding of schools and infrastructure. In Denver, Colorado, the city spent over $45 million on migrant services, diverting funds from existing social programs. These weren't abstract budget numbers. These were real dollars, taken from American citizens who needed those services and redirected to people who entered the country illegally. And for the towns and counties closest to the southern border, places like Eagle Pass, Texas, and Yuma, Arizona, the strain was existential. Small hospitals were overwhelmed, schools became overcrowded, local law enforcement was stretched beyond its capacity. These were communities that asked Washington for help and got silence in return. While Washington looked away, it was the states, led by Republican governors, who mounted the resistance. Texas Governor Greg Abbott launched Operation Lone Star in March 2021, deploying over 10,000 National Guard troops to the southern border. Texas also began busing migrants to Washington, D.C., New York City, and Chicago, putting the burden of the crisis onto the cities that had championed open border policies. It was a political masterstroke that forced the crisis into the national conversation in a way that the mainstream media could no longer ignore. In Arizona, Governor Doug Ducey ordered National Guard troops to the border and began erecting temporary shipping container barriers where the federal wall had been halted mid-construction. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis chartered flights transporting migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, in September 2022, an island retreat for some of the country's wealthiest liberals. The backlash from the left was immediate and revealing. The people loudest about open border policies wanted those borders open, just not near their homes. In January 2025, newly re-elected President Donald Trump signed a series of executive orders on his first day back in office, reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy, declaring a national emergency at the southern border, resuming border wall construction, ending catch and release, and deploying active duty military to assist with enforcement. CBP data for early 2025 showed border encounters plummeting by more than 90% compared to the same period in 2024. When the policies change, the numbers change. The facts are clear. The decisions were made deliberately. The consequences were paid by everyday Americans, in communities overwhelmed by the influx, in families who lost loved ones to fentanyl, and taxpayers who footed a $150 billion annual bill. America First Daily is committed to bringing you the stories the mainstream media won't tell you, with the facts, the names, and the documentation to back every claim. If this report opened your eyes, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to see the numbers, because the truth doesn't need spin, it just needs to be told.